Nobody's going. One of the things that I think you got to pay attention to is that the best readers read all the time. I mean, and that's one of the big points of this book is that you got to give them time to read, and you have to encourage their reading, and you can't just count on it happening at home. For the poorest readers, they probably don't get a lot of exposure to reading at home. So the influence of time to read in school and having materials available and somebody who can get to know their preferences and their reading level and what would help them to move to the next step is certainly something that we can learn. But the biggest step coming from the best readers is just read a lot.
I would add to that, I think, and Matt hinted about it, is I think you have to give them the choice. I think the poorest readers tend to go for just the stuff that's assigned in school, which isn't necessarily at their level or to their taste. So I think the best readers probably do a lot more with their own choosing.
I love the fact that they use the word exemplar not to describe text, but to describe readers. So I think she used exemplar readers in the room and learning from them and learning from their habits. So I thought that was a good word choice on her part.
One of the things that was always hard for me as a classroom teacher is that I had a really hard time making sure I stocked books that I didn't like. Because there are so many kids who needed books that weren't my favorite books, and it was always a struggle for me to figure out, just because I don't like this book doesn't mean a kid wouldn't really love this series or this author as a writer. So I thought I did that, but I think that's something that I could have done a better job with. You know, and just seeking out those things. When I go to the bookstore to buy books for my students, I look at the ones that I like. And I look at the ones that I don't like, and I decide that I don't like them and that I'm not going to spend as much money for those as I would the ones that I just think are great. So I think that's something that is hard as a teacher and that I would need to do a better job of.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things I talked about before is that I have a hard time with books that aren't sci-fi and fantasy, and so getting books that are of interest to others, I always feel like I have to be somewhat interested in them. Like Number of the Stars is one of my favorite books. It has nothing to do with sci-fi and fantasy. And so I have to give those other books a try, even though they're not my favorite. And so I actually did that, and I bought a book on a whim, and it was about the Japanese internment camps. And written from the point of view of a little Japanese girl who had to move into one from California with her family. And it was a quick read, but it was awesome. I keep in my mind comparing it to Number of the Stars, and I'm like, well, there's got to be more of these books out there, so me ignoring them doesn't make that okay. It's just I need to find those books somehow, you know?
I think the American Library Association has some really good lists. When I go out of my genre comfort zone, the ones that I've read that I've sort of liked the most have often been on the American Library Association list. So there's a lot. I'm not sure if you all are aware that there's a lot beyond Caldecott and Newbery and Prince. There's also some really interesting ones that cater to books that have to do with kids who have disabilities and multicultural books and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know, that's always an option. One of my favorite books, I think it's Running Dream, I always forget if there's an S, was from one of those lists. And realistic fiction is not always my favorite, but it's fantastic. It's also one of my favorite of all time now, and I'm really glad that I gave it a chance and I found it on one of those lists.
Was that American Library Journal, Julie?
No, American Library Association.
Association, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, we can add the link over on the side so that we can
I'll find it
for whoever needs it in the future, because I'm sure we'll refer back to it.
It's the Youth Media Award winners.
Okay.
And I'll get you a link right now.
Awesome. The next quote is from the book, and it says, they shouldn't have to struggle so much to remain readers, though. It's in the section, and they do return.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want us to kind of think about. How can we motivate and encourage readers? Because it seems like sometimes we get kids to a point where they love reading, and then somehow throughout our time in the public school system, many of them don't remain to love reading, and some don't really from the start. So that's important for us to remember too. But for example, my niece came over yesterday to visit us at the lake, and she is going into 8th grade, and I had to tell my daughter, you may not read when the guests are here because it's rude to just sit there and read after Grandma and Grandpa came to visit and whatever. But my niece said to me, Kimberly, I have not read one book since school ended, and I faked those 5.
Oh.
And I wanted to cry, and I'm like, Paige, that's terrible. Oh my gosh. So I spent some time with her on the internet trying to look for books that she might be interested in, things that she actually likes. She's a gymnast, whatever. But I thought about that, and I was horrified when she said she hasn't read one since school ended, which probably isn't that uncommon. But when she told me she faked the 5 that she read at school last year, and it was only 5, that kind of freaked me out, because she's a 7th grader. She still has, and she was a struggling reader as a child. So she's been able to get up to level, but she won't stay there. I don't know what she'll look like in the fall. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I was going to say, I think that's particularly hard when we get to the secondary levels, where the content areas are all pigeonholed. So a science teacher doesn't feel that they need to provide time for reading. Math teacher doesn't feel they need time for reading. And so I think it comes down to we put the burden on the ELA teacher, and they already have their own full plate of stuff. So, I think we just squeeze it right out of the schedule. I don't think it was intentional on the part of schools. I just think it's happened, and we don't know how to get that back.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Julie.
I've known a few people who consider themselves non-readers, and I found with these as adults, and I found that these non-readers, including my dad actually, what they needed was a gateway book based upon interests. And I've had the good fortune of knowing a couple people well enough to know which book to place in their hands. And for my dad, it was Angela's Ashes. So he, was not a reader, and newspapers, maybe occasionally a magazine, but not books at all. And I gave him Angela's Ashes right after I got out of library school, and he became a voracious reader from that. So I think that don't lose hope. It sometimes takes a lot of trial and error to get people hooked in, but once you get something and they love it, I think it can gain a lot of momentum.
I loved reading Angela's Ashes. It was years ago, and I think I read several other books by the same author. He was a teacher, wasn't he? An Irish? Yeah, that's a good story. I usually have students document home reading, but I think I'm going to change that up this year. But I was thinking about encouraging children, but as well as their families, to be lifelong readers. So I think an engagement with the public library this year is going to be a stronger focus for me. Not only ask families to come in with their children's Dexter library cards ready to go, but perhaps to visit the public library more often with my class. And I know people always say, where are you going to find the time? And I hope to do that this year. Because I know, our kids can't leave here as an island and go up to 7th grade or continue their education. I mean, it kind of takes a village in a way. So I think to involve their families in some way would be meaningful, although the author strongly suggested that home reading requirement is probably not the best way to go. Why did she say that? Do you guys remember what she said about that?
I think it was that most of the time it was just a burden on the families to do this, to get the student whatever grade they want. Like, the students who will read will be responsible.
Yeah.
You got to sign this, and this is how many times I read. And the parents don't really pay attention to how long they read. They don't, see the value in it so much.
Right.
And so it was kind of an extra burden on them that wasn't representing real information and wasn't helping get the students that really needed to read at home to read more. It was just something else that they were responsible for at home. And, it could be faked. It was often faked, I think she said, because parents are too busy, don't know if they read, whatever,
Yeah, I know my home reading logs were often faked. Yeah. Okay, good, thanks.
I wondered about that same thing about the home reading logs, because we did home reading logs in almost all of our classrooms, in 1st and 2nd grade classrooms at Bates and Cornerstone. I always did. And one of the things that we decided is that when we didn't, that it didn't get parents in the habit of having kids practice reading. So I kind of wondered about it from a little bit different perspective, since thinking about the early elementary perspective of reading has to be a habit at that stage, because they're practicing learning how to read, not just reading for enjoyment. So I'm not sure, I still am not sure, like if a teacher asked me, what do you think about home reading logs? I guess it would really depend for me on how the teacher used them. Like you've all said, you've assessed that you think that some of them were faked, or that a majority of them were faked, then I would say it's not very productive. But I guess if a teacher had a rationale that they thought that they were using them in a way that was helpful to get the parents in a healthy homework habit, then I guess I still am not sure what I think about that. If I had my own classroom in the fall, I think I would try to not use them, because I've tried using them, and I would like to see what the difference kind of is, just to get a different feel on that. I can't really remember when I didn't use them. I can't really remember how different I felt about whether or not the kids made as much progress, and things are so different academically for kids that I'm not sure if that was the contributing factor, or if it was something, the changing curriculum perhaps. But are there other things that you guys think that you might want to try this year in your classrooms after reading the book? And then if so, what kinds of support, if any, and maybe you don't need any now, but maybe along the way we'll think of something, can the coaches provide? I know we've had some good ideas throughout the discussion this summer about ways to incorporate technology that Meredith could kind of help you get rolling or check in with you and at least see if there's anything like that that you guys can think of that the coaches can help you with. We'd be happy to help, since we've all kind of been discussing our way through this different kind of reading this summer.
I know early on that Goodreads was mentioned as a website, and maybe Kids Blog or Kid Blog. Are those avenues that children can use to write book reviews? Either of those places?
Absolutely. So the difference between those two would be that Kid Blog would be kind of locked down to your classroom. If you wanted to, you could grant, others access, like parents or something like that. that's a little more, it's a little more insular. So if you wanted to do, reviews strictly within your classroom and you have kids recommending books to other kids, blogging might be a good avenue for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Julie's idea about using Goodreads, that's kind of just like it's almost like, when you're browsing on Amazon and you read the user reviews, except they're all reviews on books. So in that sense, kids are taking their review and they're putting it out there to the real world. So they're putting it out to everyone else out there. Now, I don't see why that couldn't happen simultaneously. If they wrote a review to put on a blog for their peers to read, they could also just copy-paste it and put it over into Goodreads for a broader audience if you wanted to do both. Or you could just say, we're going to keep it in-house, or no, we're going to have kids, we could have students in our class search others' reviews on Goodreads. I mean, it's kind of up to how broad you want to make it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Is Goodreads for children only?
No, it's
Okay.
the world in general. So.
Okay.
But the communities there.
World.
I know, but the people who, sorry, my dog is barking. But in general, I mean, the Goodreads community is really safe. I mean, it's a community of readers. I think it'd be appropriate for 6th graders.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I'm going to ask the people who are actively teaching this question. So, do you ever have kids asked to take books out when they go out to recess?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the response to that?
I say yes.
I don't mind.
I don't mind. Yeah.
It's really their time.
I just think it would be interesting. I would think some people who are avid readers might actually want that time to just sit down with a book and read. I just have visions of them going out and be forced to play kickball or something like I was in elementary school.
Now, the interesting thing, Jeff, is like where do they have to read that's comfortable? And I know there's benches out there and they can always try to smush themselves into something, but
yeah.
I mean, other than that, there's not, unless they're comfortable just sitting on grass or whatever, wherever, there's not a lot of comfortable spots for them to sit out there, I would say.
Right.
That's an interesting problem. I wonder if that'd be something to look into. I don't know whether it's a donor's shoes project or what for comfortable seating, whether they're I'm thinking like folding camp chairs or I love the chairs called Crazy Creeks. They're just like they lie flat and you just open it and it could store down really small. That might be an interesting project to get portable outdoor seating so kids could just kind of grab it and then use it if they wanted it.
I'm also just that little free library thing I thought was kind of cool. I hadn't heard about it until my niece did it. I'm just wondering if we even had something like that out in our recess areas, if the kids could just, put a book, read a book, pop it back in there. I know it kind of competes with our own internal library systems and the Dexter Public Library, but I just think having books available to kids, might be an interesting concept. Have a bench out there,
Wasn't there
books or so.
Wasn't there a discussion once at Creekside about putting books in the lunchroom as well? I don't know if I'm imagining that, but I remember someone saying something about putting them up around the lunchroom so kids could grab them if they wanted to read at lunch.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember that, but with the whole, I was talking to a friend last weekend, and she said, I was telling her about this book, and she said, well, the way you could approach it is that we will be reading all day, all year, but we will be taking breaks to do other things during the day, but mostly we are going to spend the year reading. And I thought, that's a great way to frame it. So thinking about that, maybe they take to the lunchroom if they want to, and then maybe come out in the hall and read quietly when they're finished eating lunch. So.
See, I don't think anybody's ever told them not to bring books to the cafeteria, too,
No.
because I've always let kids bring them. I don't think there's a rule against it, unless it's causing some kind of commotion or trouble. Yeah, that's a good idea, too, but interesting idea would be having some books available like that. But I don't know if it could be part of the library system, but then you'd have to check it out. Yeah, I don't know.
Bates and Cornerstone do that. And they just have bins full of books. Most of them are books that teachers just donated, like 5 or 6 year, or they're on the free table, like in the lounge, and Craig just collects them and puts them in the bins at the cafeteria. Bates does it as well. They have bins on their stage. And kids, just when they finished eating, if they took their tray and put it back, then they're allowed to get a book for the rest of the time. They get used a lot. The other thing that they do is Wednesday readers. So on Wednesday, to keep the peace in the cafeteria, they have a parent or a person come in and read. And they read a book to the kids and then show it on, if there's pictures, they show it on the document camera there. But they read to the room, and then it kind of like gives anyone who has to endure the noise level there a break.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I mean, I don't know how that would work, because the books that your kids might want to hear might last longer than the lunch period, but you could still have someone else continue it. So almost always it's parents or grandparents or just random people from the community. Like we've had a few people from businesses in the community come to do Wednesday reader. And we don't announce who it is to the kids in advance, because if the person cancels, then it's a staff member who just volunteers, or Craig will just do it. But same at Bates, they have readers as well.
I like that idea, because Tammy's trying to get us to somehow get Creekside to be more out there, to not commercialize, but get the word out on opportunities to come to Creekside, to enjoy Creekside. And so that might be a way to do it. I get the whole idea of, I mean, I know it can work with little kids too, but with the big kids, getting them all to be quiet. I would wonder if it would be okay to take a group of kids who wanted to hear something read,
mm-hmm.
and move them out somewhere. Like we have a sitting corner out in the hall, a nice little comfy lounge area, and just have an adult read to a smaller group who's chosen to be there. And, like you said, longer book, maybe continue it. Even if they've read it before, I think having somebody read it to them still could generate them interest for those readers to participate.
Another thing that you can do, if with a sort of interesting books for the 5th and 6th graders, might be to do book previews. Instead of actually reading a picture book, you could just read the first couple pages and then, say like, this book is available if you want to take it or check it out. Other things that I've played with before are also book swaps, where you just have a bunch of paperback books and people bring them in, and then you can take one on the honor system with the assumption that you would also leave one at some point. So then it takes care of the problem of running out. So those are other options. I think the previews work pretty well with the 5th and 6th graders, because it gets them excited, and you can do just a quote from part of the book or the first page or even the back, and you can preview a whole bunch from different genres, and then they get really excited, and the problem is then they all want the same book, so then you have to sort of figure out what to do about that.
Could we maybe do it just before the Scholastic Book Fair so that the parents could then order those books, the first couple days, prime them up a little bit for options on the list?
Well, I was also thinking, if you're having students review books, why not I know we want to get the community in, but why not have students share if they want to share their reviews with other kids at lunch? Wouldn't that be a cool opportunity?
Very cool.
Maybe we could even have some kids who would be willing to read their writing out loud. Some stuff they might be working on, poetry or whatever. It might be a good opportunity for some young authors to build, if you think about how some of these books right now, like The Martian and stuff, the guy kind of writes a chapter, posted it, people all responded to it, and then he wrote the next chapter, and now it's going to be made into a movie, for Pete's sake.
It sounds like it would be a good flex class.
True.
So you asked about how you can support.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a little overwhelmed as far as like how to get going with the school year. I mean, my class is a mess right now, but even considering now I'm teaching language arts, which I haven't taught in a few years, let alone I know everybody's in the same boat now that we're doing writer's workshop and we have making meaning and we're trying to do book, more book club idea type things, getting students involved with reading in school and their choice books and getting the right books in their hands. It's overwhelming for me to think about how I'm going to start this school year, which is why I participated in this book club, and I'm ready to go down the hall to the next thing too, just to get my mind, where can I start? And then what's the end result I want too, So I don't know how you can help. I just know that's where I'm currently sitting at.
I'm thinking this reminds me of the place that many of the Wiley teachers were at last fall, because they were sitting in the same kind of situation. Like they were switching over from more whole group instruction to small group instruction, which was way overwhelming for them. At the same time, we were starting into making meaning, and at this year we'll be in a similar situation because we're starting with new making meaning. And then some of them starting into a little bit of writer's workshop as well. So one of the things that we did was meet with them together. Some people wanted help with their schedule. So, like the scheduling part of it was the biggest, like just thinking about which things they could fit into their schedule in little chunks were helpful first. But we met with them individually because everyone's schedule is different. So that's something that, I can meet with you here either before school starts, or if you'd rather just like start a few days in and then get a few days under your belt and then meet. Some people prefer to brainstorm about the whole thing so that you can kind of put a plan in place and rolling. And then sometimes after I meet with teachers, there's a time where we think, oh, there's this cool technology thing that Meredith can help you with, or let's look at some data and then Jeff can jump into. But, I'm happy to do that if you want to do that either before school or later when things get settled. Just let me know. We can kind of brainstorm together what it looks. I think that's the hardest part a lot of times is trying to figure out how to fit it all in.
And I know I've spoken a lot about different, tech tools we can use in reading and writing, and I guess what happened with me when I was working with the K2 teachers, and this year, I'm expanding my focus, but
Yay!
I know, excited. But pick, if you want to pick one tech tool to play with, don't think like, oh, I need to do the blogging and the Goodreads and I need to do the digital writer's notebook, and I mean that's way too much. You're not going to do all that one year. Pick one tool you want to try that sounds the best with what you're already doing. It seems like it's going to fit in there. It seems like that makes sense. Schedule a coaching meeting with me. We'll get your account set up. We'll get you started. I can model a lesson with the kids in using it and get them using it. And then just, try it with some fidelity and see if it works. And if it doesn't, drop it. But if it does, kind of stick with that. Because I think with the tech side, people say, oh, that tool's cool. That's neat. I want to use this and this and this. And it's easy to get bogged down in all the possibilities. And I say just pick one that fits with what you do and start there. And if you get really great and comfortable at that, then you can look at some of those other tools, but limit it. So if you can think of one tool or you have one goal that you have, like one thing you'd like to streamline or have technology integrated in, let me know and I can help connect you to the tool and go from there. So
I think that's a great suggestion, Mare. And that's what I'm thinking about. Blogging about what we read kind of kills two birds with one stone, with the reading and the writing. Do you guys have anything to say about the News ELA website? I did a trial subscription last year for my class that was free, and so I accessed as much as I could, but for current leveled expository text with current events, I loved it. I loved using it with my kids.
I had second grade classes using it last year, and they really liked it too. I think it's a great source, and I think you can get a decent amount of stuff with the free subscription.
Okay.
It's a nice tool to pull from. I think it's a great site.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I know I signed up for a 30-day trial, and I wasn't sure what extended. I haven't played with it much this summer. So I just wondered if you knew anything about it. Okay. Sure.
I'm on it. I'll put the link up.
Thanks.
You got it. Okay.
So I felt with reading this to answer one of the questions, not necessarily that there's anything, any one new thing that I'm going to do, but I felt validated. I let the kids read at the end of their media class, and I wasn't sure, it's like, is that okay to do? Because I could, cram it full of other instruction probably, or do something else. And so this has reinforced that that is in fact a good thing to do. And I had sort of suspected that it hooked them a little bit better if you give them a chance to start reading the book. Then they're going to want to finish it. Usually, if they are enjoying it. But the other thing that might be kind of fun to add, I usually go through and I'm putting books on carts, and I'm doing all sorts of things while they're reading, sort of straightening and working on the displays. But maybe I'll model reading too once in a while, and something from the collection, and show them that I'm enjoying it too. I used to do that in a former job. I would sit with them and read, because it was the only way to get them to read quietly. They'd be really self-conscious with me there, so they would actually do it. But it might be fun to do that a little bit, so maybe I'll add that.
Okay, and then the last thing, and then I think we'll be able to be done a little bit early, probably, is what information, after reading this book this summer, what information would you like to share with a colleague about the book, and who would you like to specifically share it with? Like, can you think of one person on our staff that you might enjoy the book if you passed it along, or benefit from talking with some of us about some of the things that you learned or liked about the book?
That's fairly straightforward for me. My team partner, Kirsten Butler, is more of a math teacher than an ELA teacher, although she's been doing a heck of a job the last couple of years. She's been teaming with me doing the ELA and social studies piece. And one of her main frustrations is just not knowing, some of the things to do to help kids learn how to read. And so I think just sharing this with her and the ideas involved, I don't think it'd be too overwhelming or frustrating for her. I know, like me, she'd probably want to know, well, how do I start? What do I do for a next step, kind of thing. But certainly our entire pod here in Creekside, the 100 Hall, none of the other ones are in the discussion here. So we are talking about planning ELA together, maybe even math. We have the same schedule. So we'll definitely be having lots of conversations where I can bring this book into it. And if anybody wants to borrow it, I'll certainly share it with them.
I figured I would maybe put my copy in the professional collection in the Creekside Library, so anybody who wants to can check it out. It's got a little bit of marking up, but that's all right.
I've already shared it with Christy Newsom, and she's gone ahead and read it. And she and I teamed for many years and taught ELA together. So we've kind of already brainstormed about some changes that we thought we'd make to our ELA curriculum and just processes this year in class. So that's been really helpful. I feel a little isolated because Erin and I are kind of our own pod. We're on a weird lunch schedule this year. We don't have planning with other 6th grade teachers. We share planning with 5th grade teachers, and Erin and I both teach different subjects. So I'm going to need to constantly reach out, like this meeting that Matt and I are going to, constantly reach out to other 6th grade teachers to get the lowdown about what everybody else is doing. So anyway, that's my complaint.
I wish you guys didn't have to be on an off schedule. The problem is with the way our schedule is, somebody has to be.
I know. And we're like the kid in the middle of both pods.
Well, I don't. It's not only that. It's mentoring for me with Candace is really hard when we don't have the same schedule, and she and I
Oh,
have
yeah.
after school schedules we have to go to.
Right.
So getting us together was somewhat important. But since you're mentoring Aaron, it was important as well to have you guys still together. So
Oh,
I don't know.
definitely. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not blaming anybody.
No, I know.
We just
I don't
feel a
know.
little left out of the loop sometimes.
I don't know if there's a solution for it unless you guys want to move down our hall, and then you'll at least be in our hallway.
Yeah. A little geographically closer.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, and we're always available. I mean, just come see me before school or after school.
Thanks.
Whatever. We absolutely are nice people.
The coaches are hoping to be in your building a little bit more this year too. Instead of being stationed only at Meredith, only being at Bates and Cornerstone, and Jeff and I having an office at the high school. We'll still have an office at the high school, and maybe Meredith too. Are you going to join us there, Meredith? We don't know. So we'll still have desks at the high school, and meeting space at the high school, but we will also have space in each building. So the three of us will share the space, we think, in each building, but we'll be in the buildings more than just to meet with people. We'll be there, so that we are able to have people just pop in if we need to, or for people to kind of run into us with questions instead of having to make a specific appointment. If it's easier for us to have an appointment so that we're in the right building at the right time. But it'll be nice to be able to be in your spaces in each building this year instead of stuck on an island.
Yeah, it's definitely my hope this year that if I'm not in a meeting with somebody else in their classroom, that I'm parked in one of the buildings, and I'm going to try to rotate like each day between buildings. So, because I found a lot of the tech coaching that was most beneficial to the K2 staff was sometimes I'd be working on a project and they just pop in my office and it was an impromptu, unplanned meeting, and we just made it work. So we'll definitely be around Creekside so we can have those kind of things.
Did Jeff fall off his chair? All of a sudden his face is missing. It says be back in a minute. He must have had to make one of those phone calls. So I think that's really all we need to discuss, unless someone wants to discuss anything different. Other than that, I'm super excited that we had the chance to talk about the book this summer. It is one of the books that I really love. There's a next book in the series. It's called Reading in the Wild, and that one's really good too. Tammy gave it to me around Christmas time this year as a present, but it's also a really, really good book. So if anyone's interested in that one, I'm almost finished with it if anyone wants to borrow the copy, but that one's a really good book as well.
Maybe for next summer we can do that one.
Yeah, or who knows? This was pretty easy. So yeah, I think I also...
Oh, sorry, Kimberly. I wanted to ask, if you guys can... I mean, this is the first time I've ever done any kind of like remote meetings with Google Hangouts, and I know I've bounced around ideas of doing kind of flipped tech PD where we meet ahead of time or do something, and then you'd have time on your own. I don't know. I'm just this whole tech piece with the virtual meeting. Let me know what you think about it. I know it's had its flaws, but I just want to see if this is something that's easier for people versus having to meet in a physical space. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Kimberly, where is your cottage?
Sorry.
Where are you?
We're on Round Lake. Sorry, I'm trying to answer that